Welcome, everybody. It's great to see all these young faces smiling back at me. My name is Jeff Sventek. I am currently the Executive Director for the Aerospace Medical Association. I've been in this position for a little over 11 years now. Our association was formed in 1929 by the first ever federal air surgeon, Dr. Lewis Bauer. And if you think back, 1929 was just a handful of years after the first flight at Kitty Hawk, about 20 plus years after Kitty Hawk. And in that time period, aviation had grown significantly. They were making tremendous improvements in aircraft and the technology associated with the aircraft. And Dr. Bauer saw that in the future, there was going to be a huge push for commercial aviation with passengers flying on a regular basis. He wanted to be sure that all the pilots, all the air crew working on those aircraft were healthy, they were safe, and that their performance was at the highest possible level to protect themselves, the aircraft, and most importantly, the passengers that were flying with them. So he established our association at that time in 1929. And since that time, our association has attracted all kinds of scientists and physicians that are interested in the human body. What happens to the human body when you get on an airplane and now spacecraft, and you go up into an environment that can be at times quite hostile to the individuals. Ralph, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to see if you could touch up on, and you actually kind of did right there, a little bit about the difference between regular medicine and aerospace medicine. Why is there a need for that specific niche in the medical field?
Sure, that's a great question. Regular medicine, when a person graduates from college and they're pre-med and they want to go to medical school, when they go to medical school, they are taught over a 4-year period the basics of human physiology, what goes on inside of the body, the biochemistry, all of the ways that the human body is supposed to work and how it fails in some cases. That's when you go to your family doctor, when you've got your body is not working properly, and the family doctor listens to you, evaluates your symptoms, decides on what the possible problem might be, and more importantly, what they can do to get you back to a healthy status. Aviation's different because anytime you get in an aircraft that doesn't have cabin pressurization, you're going up through the atmosphere, and as you climb in altitude, the atmospheric pressure around the human body is continually decreasing. So some of you may, I don't know, maybe you live at high altitude or you have visited at high altitudes, and you start to notice your breathing is a little bit labored, that maybe at times if you try to exercise or run like you normally would at a lower altitude, you get lightheaded, you're breathing heavier, and it's just much more of a workout. That's because the total pressure around your body at altitude has reduced, which means that the partial pressure of oxygen, and you all know how important oxygen is in the human body, that partial pressure is not sufficient to push enough oxygen from your lungs into your bloodstream and get it to the various parts of your body that's required. So we recognized this early on when we started flying higher and higher and higher in aircraft. And a discipline was established called aerospace medicine to look at this unusual environment called high altitude and come up with ways to protect the humans that are working in that environment all of the time. I personally am trained as an aerospace physiologist. And during my time in the Air Force, I ran altitude chambers, big metal boxes where we would suck the pressure out of the inside of the box, and we would have pilots and people like myself inside watching them, observing them. And we would teach them what happens, what it feels like to get a condition called hypoxia, where you don't have adequate oxygen in your body. So we would take them to a simulated altitude pressure of 25,000 feet. And we would tell them to drop their oxygen masks from their helmets. And over a period of 3 to 5 minutes, they would get hypoxic, and they would feel these symptoms of tingling, visual disruption. Some of them will get lightheaded and dizzy. Now, it's important to recognize when that happens, because the next thing we teach them is, if you're in an airplane and you start to feel this way, what are you going to do? Well, there are a couple things. You can either descend in the aircraft to get to a lower altitude with a higher pressure, or if you have oxygen equipment available like they do in the chamber, is to put the oxygen equipment back on and get a higher percentage of oxygen into the body to recover from that. And it's really quick when that happens. So I spent 34 years in the United States Air Force, doing the majority of that time was doing aerospace physiology work, and then I was, toward the end of my career, I was a commander of hospitals and so on and so forth. In my job now as the executive director, I get to work continuously with physicians, with scientists who have dedicated their careers to aerospace activity. Now, when I say aerospace, understand that's not only airplanes, but that's also space. I have a lot of good friends who are physicians at NASA and at the European Space Agency. And I have a couple of good friends who are not only physicians, but they are also active astronauts and have been to the space station several times. So that's why there is a need for a specialty like aerospace medicine.
And the amount of interesting people I'm sure that you encounter in your job is just astounding. So, you know, we met for that Apollo 11 anniversary, and that was mind-blowing that these were the people who put somebody on the moon. Do you mind if, because we don't want to take too much of your time, and again, students or teachers, if you guys have any questions, go ahead and message them in the chat. But Jeff, do you mind if some of the students ask you some questions while we have
I'd be happy to answer a couple questions, sure.
Absolutely. We have Mev in Italy. Mev, you should be able to unmute. You had a pretty good question.
Nice to meet you, Mr. Sventek. In your opinion, how important is the value of help, and what problems can be solved with the care of health and safety in the aerospace field?
Yeah, great question.
Thank you.
The health is paramount. Aerospace medicine is what we call a preventive medicine specialty. In other words, our doctors and our scientists are constantly working with all of the people that work in the aviation and space environments to ensure that they are always healthy and their performance is at a maximum level. If they get sick or their performance is deteriorated for any reason, we feel like we have not done our job. Now, this is different than other doctors who wait until a problem presents in the body and then tries to fix it. That's called intervention. We focus on prevention, and you're exactly right. We want to make sure that all of our air crew, our flight attendants, are always healthy, always performing at their maximum level, and taking care of themselves and everybody that's on board their aircraft.
It's a great answer. We have a question from Miss Kalahiki's class, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, but she's at Pinecrest Academy Inspirata campus here in Nevada, that's here in America. They want to know what happens to the human body when there is zero gravity in the air.
Yeah, we call that space. And zero gravity is a very unique phenomenon. We actually can simulate that here closer to planet Earth. We put astronauts and scientists on board relatively large aircraft, and they will gain speed on a level configuration, and then they will pitch up to a fairly steep pitch. They'll climb, and then they'll do a maneuver like that, where they'll push the nose of the aircraft over back toward the Earth. And for about a 10 to 15 second period of time, they can actually induce zero gravity on board that aircraft. And you can see pictures of it on YouTube where people get sick a lot in this simulated environment. So they fondly refer to the aircraft as the vomit comet. And but you can see these folks experiencing that. What happens to the human body? A lot happens to the human body. Right now, we're sitting in 1G. Our body has developed and evolved over millennia to a 1G environment. I put you in an environment in the space station where it's close to 0G. What happens to the blood in your body? Under 1G, it's constantly being pulled down toward your feet when you're standing up. Even if you're standing up in the space station, if it's 0G, you don't have that force of gravity pulling the blood down toward your feet. So the blood tends to pool in your upper body and up into your head. That's just one of the problems. We've also noticed that extended time at 0G causes the body to lose calcium, which reduces the strength of your bones in your body. We've also noticed that extended periods of 0G causes the body muscles to go through something called atrophy. They start to weaken, they start to lose cells, and your muscles aren't as strong as they used to be. These are all very confounding problems for our scientists and our physicians who are right now looking at how can we get to Mars and make sure that when we get to Mars, that our astronauts are healthy, fit, and ready to perform duties on the Mars surface. And I would ask your group, does anybody know how long right now, if we were to launch today, a space ship with 2, 3, 4 astronauts in it, how long it would take before they got to Mars?
Thumbs up if you think you know the answer, and we'll unmute you to answer that. Thumbs up. Okay, I got one of, we'll go with Miss Kalahiki's. She had, you can unmute yourself. Sorry, you guys, we have like 1,000 people named Tiffany Kalahiki. So go ahead. What do you think it is?
Is it 8 months?
Really close. It's 9 months. Yep. 9 months to get out there. And they're going to be in 0G environment unless we can find a way to develop an artificial gravity force on board the spacecraft. They get there. The plan right now is to fly the 9 months to get there, spend 9 months on the Mars surface, and then make the 9-month trip back to planet Earth. We have a lot of human problems that we have to solve before we actually get in a spacecraft and go to Mars and back.
So that's a pretty solid answer. We had a follow-up question from Miss Pressler, someone in her class. They wanted to know, how long does G-force, how long can that last on a spaceship presently?
The 0G force?
Yeah.
If you're out in space, the 0G is forever. I mean, as long as you're in space, if you're not close to another heavenly body like the moon, Mars, or any other planet, there will be no gravitational force outside of those planetary bodies.
Good answer. And we know with your experience in the United States Air Force, we have a question from one of our kids in Italy. Jan had a question regarding being a pilot.
Okay.
Good morning, Mr. Sventek. Personally, I am a glider pilot, but my dream is to become maybe an Air Force pilot. And what do you recommend to someone who wants to become a pilot? Yeah, how to prepare itself? Yeah,
that's a really good question. Flying a glider is a very unique skill set in itself. So you're ahead of the game. The nice thing, the difference between flying an aircraft as a pilot and a glider as a pilot is that if you start to run out of lift in an airplane, you've got an aircraft engine that you can start moving the airplane around. If you start losing lift in a glider, you're just gonna have to find some more lift somewhere. Things that you could do to help yourself is you're exactly doing it. You're learning about the aviation environment. You're exposing yourself to some of the unique issues that pilots have to deal with. Be sure that you are medically fit, because there is a very rigorous medical examination that you must pass to be accepted into most pilot training programs, particularly in the military. It's very competitive to get into the military pilot training programs. Vision is critical. Typically, they're looking for 20/20 vision. Blood pressure must be under control, so on and so forth. You're young, you're probably in really good shape, so it's probably not that much to worry about. But just keep pursuing, reading as much as you can, continue to fly the glider, and if you get a chance to go out and fly in a powered aircraft, just to see how that feels, go do that. take advantage of those opportunities.
Some sound advice. And Jeff, before we let you go, what kind of advice would you give to all these kids as the director of asthma, and you've done so much with your career and met so many interesting people? What kind of advice would you give to these kids as they go off into the world and kind of figure out what they want to do, whether it has to do with medicine or not?
Yeah. I'm 67 years old, and as I look back at my lifetime, you reflect on some things that you wish you had done differently, and wish you had gotten some advice from other people. So I hope what I tell you in just a second is useful to some of you. I grew up on a dairy farm in Western New York State. My goal in life at that time was to grow up and go to college and then go to vet school and work with animals. We were pretty poor growing up on the farm, so we didn't have the ability without scholarships for me to go to college. So I enlisted in the Air Force as a musician. I was a musician in high school, and I played in the Air Force band for 3 years. And during that time, took a couple of tests, and the Air Force gave me a scholarship so I could go to college. So I studied pre-med, pre-vet, again with the idea that I'd go to vet school. And I got this phone call, since the Air Force sponsored me for my undergraduate training. I got a phone call from them and said, "We're looking for you. If you want, we can send you to training and you can become an aerospace physiologist." I had no idea what that was, but I read about it in the manual, and it looked exciting and it looked challenging. And so I said, "Sure, let's go do this." That's how I got into aerospace medicine. It was just, it was just an opportunity that lent itself to my education. It lent itself to something that I had an interest in. That's aviation, and I pursued it. I went on and got my private pilot's license, and as an aerospace physiologist, I got to fly in almost every aircraft that the Air Force has. I've pulled 9 Gs in the F-16. I've pulled 7 Gs in the F-15. I've flown for 9 hours in a B-52 bomber. So don't focus on just one opportunity in your career. I mean, pursue what you're passionate about, but you're going to find that early on in your life, during your training and all, opportunities will present themselves, and don't just push them away immediately. Give them some consideration, because it may be a stepping stone for you to get to something that you really hadn't thought about as a career.